Let's break this formula up so that we understand how this works. We select last year's sales divided by first year's sales. We can say it's a jump of 70%. But we want a compounded annual growth rate. What was the rate that we were supposed to, what was the rate that was supposed to be divided, or what was the rate at which the sales were to grow every year? So let's say it is raised to the power, let's put this in a bracket, raised to the power 1 by 7, let's put that in a bracket as well, minus what this 7.9% denotes is if is equal to 7,000 is my first year sales is multiplied by the growth rate, which is 1 plus the growth rate for 7 years compounded annually, I will get the sales value of the last year. Let's recap. Sales of the first year multiplied by 1 plus the growth rate compounded annually for 7 years will give me the sales value of the last year. To arrive at 7.9%, we have simply used algebra to compute the value of H52. Moving on, the subtotal function. Often we face the dilemma of adding up selected cells within a list of data. Let's say we wanted to hide certain rows and present only an extract of the entire information and a sum. Let's say we had a list of students and their marks, but we wanted to compute only the total marks of students whose name started with A. We would hide all the other names and then do a sum. But what if we could hide the rows that we didn't want to sum and still be able to use a function that would not compute the totals of the hidden rows? Because if you use sum will simply add up all the items in the list, whether hidden or not. Subtotal is a function by Excel which allows you to compute totals and ignore hidden rows. It also gives you the option to not ignore the hidden rows. But this is an additional argument or command or flexibility over the sum function. Let's see in the example before us. The example starts with Unit 1 revenue and cost of sales. The gross profit is computed simply by adding up 700 and negative sales. But instead of sum, as we learned earlier, we have used subtotal. Let's try to recreate subtotal as in row 62 is equal to subtotal. Let's press tab. Now you can see a number of options that subtotal prompts. Subtotal says it can calculate average, count A, max, min, product, standard deviation, sum, variation, average. What would you like? From rows 1 from serial number 1 to 11, all the functions will ignore hidden rows. From rows 101 onwards, they will not ignore the hidden rows and work much like a sum function or an average function, which we will learn about later. Let's say for now we want to sum these because revenue minus cost of sales is gross profit. I say 9, press tab, then comma. The next argument is ref1, which stands for reference 1. Now, as you saw in the sum function also, number 1 was the argument for first number and number 2 was the argument for second number. We can simply select the entire range from row 59 to 61, close the bracket, press enter, and we have successfully computed the subtotal. But so far we did not see why subtotal is being used over sum here. Stay with me for a while, we'll get to know. Let's delete 600 from here. Unit 2, similar revenue, cost of sales, gross profit also has been computed using subtotal. But where subtotal really works in this example is in the consolidated gross profit. We have, as you can see, again used subtotal. The option was 9, which stands for sum, and the reference is all the way from row 59 to row 69, which includes the subtotals within and gross profits for both the units. There are no hidden rows here, then why are we using subtotal? And how come the value of consolidated gross profit is still 6,000 plus 600, which is nothing but 6,600. This is one more functionality of the subtotal function, wherein subtotal function will ignore any subtotal functions within its range. I'll repeat, the subtotal function in row 70 will ignore the values arrived at by subtotal functions in rows 62 and 68. So effectively, subtotal function will only add this value, this value, this and this value. This is how we could achieve a different kind of presentation and at the same time automating or letting Excel do all the hard work without us having to be bothered by selecting a few cells, referencing some function in a way to exclude the gross profit calculations in the above units, and still managing to do it in a clean and quick way. This was the subtotal function. Let's look at the SUMIF function. The description here is adds the cell specified by a given condition or criteria. Let's enter the function. The first argument is the range. We have denoted each quarter of a particular year as a different number. For every quarter in the first year, we have put 1. For every quarter in the second year, we have put a 2. So as you can see, intuitively we can group the first year quarters by 1 and the second year quarters as 2. So let's use these numbers as the range to our SUMIF. Let's fixed reference them. Now let's move on to the second argument of the SUMIF function, which is the criteria. We've already defined the range. Now for the first year, obviously the criteria would be that I want to add all values pertaining to 1 or year 1. So let's define that and say the criteria should be 1. the sum range. Now the sum range should be the range of cells just below the range which you selected for the criteria purpose, and the row which will represent the total that you want to sum. So let's say we want to calculate total sales year wise. We select all the values in the range above, fix them, and let's fix only the columns here because we might want to change the rows. We close the bracket and press enter. Now as you can see, we have 32,200. Let's compare it manually. If we say is equal to sum sale of the first year, 1, 2, 3, 4, bracket close, enter, 32,200. Both the answers are same. One important aspect to be remembered and to be kept in mind while using SUMIF function is, if you look here in the range argument, the range starts from column H to column O. Every time the sum range for any SUMIF function should begin with the same column and end with the same. The argument in the middle is criteria. We did manually input it as 1, but we could also choose to link it with the cell here, which represents nothing but 1. Let's anchor or fix the reference, press OK. Now what happens if I drag the formula here? Just so that we edit this formula so that criteria also moves along. If I copy this formula here, 33,600. But as you can see, we have omitted to correctly reference the rows. Control C, Control V, sorry, and here we go. In the second cell, the range remains the same, the criteria changes to 2, the sum range remains the same. So all cells to which the range or to which the quarter year pertains to 2 have been added. Now if we go back to the calculations above, we can see the same calculations here as well. In the sales function, sales cell, H77 to O77 is nothing but the quarter represented by number of year, the year number, the criteria is 1, and the sum range is H80. Similarly, when we go down, everything remains the same, only the sum range has been changed from row 80 to row 81. And gross profit again, gross profit we can achieve it by SUMIF as well as a simple sum of annual sales minus annual cost of sales. This was the SUMIF function. Let's move on to the sum product function. Sum product function allows you to calculate sum of two numbers or more numbers multiplied together. Let's see in the example before us, if we wanted to compute the total value of inventory, we have units, the price for each of the unit. What if we wanted to compute the value of total inventory? Obviously, one way could be to individually multiply the number of units by price per unit and then copy this formula across the number of line items. We have product wise value of inventory, and if we simply add these up, we will get the total value of inventory, which is similar to what we've achieved by using a sum product. Now let's look at sum product. Sum product, the description says, returns the sum of the products of corresponding ranges or arrays. Let's understand what that means. We press tab. The first argument is array 1. Let's take a step back and understand the meaning of sum product. If you see, it means sum product or sum of product. Now whatever arrays or range of cells you specify within a sum product will be multiplied and then added. So essentially, if we select the first array as the number of units and the second array as the price per unit, close the bracket, press enter, we will get the same answer. To make it more simpler to understand, let's see what sum product actually does. Sum product actually is nothing but this into this plus units, plus units multiplied by this, and so on. So here F91 is multiplied by G91, 92 by G92, and so on. All of them are computed as individual values, which is the product part, and then all of the values are added together, which is the sum part, and which give us the final value of total inventory. Now let's complicate the things a little bit. We calculated the total value of inventory. What if we wanted to calculate value of inventory based on products for males and products for females? As you can see in column H and column I, a 1 denotes that the product is applicable to a male, and a 0 that it is not applicable to that particular gender. What we want is the value of total inventory for males now. How can we achieve that? Let's see what the formula here does. The first two parts of the formula, which is F91 to F100 and G91 to G100, are similar to what we observed before for calculating value of total inventories. We can see another column and range of cells added to the formula, which is H91 to H100. So what happens in this formula is sum product calculates the product by multiplying F91 into G91 into H91, then computing F92, G92, H93 up till F100, G100 and H100. All of these values are computed and then added together. So wherever in the column H there is a 0, that value will become a 0. And then we will get a sum of total value of inventory only for the males. Similarly, we compute the total value of inventory for females by changing the range of cells from H to I. This was the sum product function. Let's move on to the round function. A round function is an easy function to understand. We have a list of numbers and we want to round them down. What we do is equal to round. The first argument is number, so we select the number. The second argument is number of digits we want to round them to. Let's say we wanted to round them to one digit. We select 1 and OK. So what happens is the entire number is rounded off to just one digit. But as we can see in the example before us, the requirement is to round the decimals up to 4 places. So let's select 4 and make it a fixed reference and press enter. So as you can see, if we remove the decimals, then we will arrive at the same number, but the number has been successfully rounded off up to 4 digits. We copy this formula across. Let's increase the column width a bit, and let's increase the decimal numbers to see that we have arrived at the same result. This was the round function. Let's move on to the mround function. The difference between mround and round is that mround will always round up away from the 0. However, round function will round to the closest, being to the negative or towards the positive. So for example, let's take 100.11. Now if we use a round function and say only one decimal place, or let's say 0 decimal places, it will give us 100. However, if we use mround and 0, restart from mround. Mround function rounds a number to the closest multiple specified in the mround argument. Let's see how. Is equal to mround. Let's say the number is 20.8 and the multiple we are using is 7. So the closest number as a multiple of 7 to 20.8 is 21. So mround will return 21. Similarly, the examples here, as we can see, mround by using the number in column D and the multiple as a reference to cell number F138, which is 7, will always give us multiples of 7 closest to the number being considered for rounding purposes. That was mround. Now let's move on to fact. Fact stands for factorial. As you might remember from your classes of permutations and combinations in maths, factorial is nothing but the number multiplied by the next consecutive number up till 1. So let's say if we had to calculate 5 factorial, it would be 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, and that would be factorial 5. Let's use the function factorial to calculate that. Number is 5, and there we go. It is as simple as computing a factorial based on the input. So similarly, in the example before us, fact computes the factorial of number 12. Moving on to sum through sheets. Sum through sheets is also referred to as a 3D sum, wherein we sum numbers across sheets in a particular cell. Now there are two ways of going about summing through sheets or summing cells which are spread across sheets. Let's take an example. As you can see in the sheet, in the workbook, the next sheets are plant 1, plant 2, plant 3, plant 4, plant 5, and we want to add the sum of all the plants here. Now one way of doing it is to manually reference each cell in different sheets. Let's do that. Is equal to, we go to plant 1, select the first sales item, then plus, select the second sales item, again plus, and keep doing it until we reach the last sheet. And press enter. Let's see, this is H7 and enter. As you can see, we have 2500, which is the revenue of all plants. But as you can see, it was a tedious task to go through all sheets and keep referencing each cell. There is a shorter and a quicker way to do it, which is sum through sheets. But one point to bear in mind before using the sum through sheets option is that every cell and every calculation for different type of assets or different type of units should be aligned in the same way for all the sheets. So if you look closely, plant 1, plant 2, plant 3 up to plant 5 are formatted and aligned in the same way. So sales of the first year will appear in cell H7 in every sheet. Similarly, sales for the second year will appear in cell I7 in every sheet. Now let's go back to summing it using Sum3D. What we do is, first we select all the sheets. Okay. Wherever we want to enter the formula, we press equal to, then we select all the sheets, we press Ctrl plus Shift and page down. Okay, up till plant 5, select the first sales item, and as you can see, the reference here is plant 1 to plant 5 H7. We will just remove the additional plant 1 from here. Let's do it once again. We have to go to sum. And there we are. We can apply this sum through sheets for each of the cells like this. I've copied the formula. If you see this sums plant 1 to plant 5, cell H8. If we look at cell H8, H8 is retail sale, so we might just want to change that formula to reflect cost of sales instead of retail sales by changing this row reference to H9. And there we are with the cost of sales. This was sum through sheets. Points to be noted and to bear in mind are that the structure of each of the sheets should be similar, and if any new sheet is added between such sheets, the sum through sheets will automatically consider that sheet within the formula. So let's say if I include another sheet here, the sum formula will automatically consider that particular cell while summing up. Now let's move on to the last function in this section, which is using the AND operator in a formula. The AND operator in a formula allows you to enter multiple functions within one cell. So let's say the example before us asks to create an alert message using a formula to show the number of checks failing, for example if there are 7 errors or differences in the model. Now we see if we sum the total number of errors given in column F, it is 7. But how can we present it in a way that we have this statement, there are 7 errors in the model? We could obviously type there are 7 errors in the model and we're done. But what if the errors change to, let's say, 10? This value still remains 7. You could say I could always go back and edit it back to 10. But don't you think that's a tedious exercise and a manual one? Every time our model goes through a change, we'll have to see whether the errors are being reflected correctly. There is a way that Excel allows us to automate this, and that is through the AND or the ampersand operator. As you can see in this example, the first part of the function was in double quotes then we have a space and then double quotes closed. Then we have the ampersand. Ampersand then allows us to insert a new function within the same cell, which is nothing but sum of all the errors. That part is closed. Now we insert another ampersand to insert another part of the function within the cell, which is double quotes, blank, space, errors in the model. Anything in the double quotes will be presented as it is. So normally when we want to present a text or a series of numbers as it is in a cell, along with other formulas or functions, we use double quotes. Let's replicate that formula. And is equal to double quotes, there are space, double quotes closed, ampersand, sum of all the errors, bracket closed, ampersand, errors in the model. Let's close that and press enter. There we are. We successfully used ampersand to create a check message which is automated and will always keep changing with the number of errors in the model.